Welcome to Live with Athena and the Greeks. I'm your host, Athena. Today, we will be interviewing the brave Odysseus, along with his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus. Please put your hands together for the man of many wiles, Odysseus.
Hello, Athena. Lovely to see you again.
Hello, Odysseus. It must be wonderful for you to be back on Ithaca with your family after all these years.
It's a dream come true. After I was stranded on Odyssey, I thought I'd never get home. It's wonderful to be reunited with my wife and husband and son.
How did you feel being only feet away from them and not being able to reveal yourself?
It was extremely hard seeing them for the first time after 20 years and not being able to tell them it was me. I had to hold back, though, to make sure they were still loyal to me.
I and the rest of the gods have been dying to know. Please tell me about your encounter with the lotus plants.
Well, as you know, the lotus is very addicting, and once you eat it, you lose all grip on reality and only care for eating the lotus plant. We landed on the island, and I sent 3 men to scout out the island. We waited for a while, but then they came back. They never came back. I went onto the island, and to find them discovered hopelessly addicted to the lotus plant.
That must have been terrible losing 3 of your men like that.
It was. We had to drag them out into the ship against their will and tie them up. I never expected having to do that to my own men.
Well, that's lovely. I have one more question for you, but first, we're going to play a little game. Odysseus, pick a letter between Alpha and Omega to see who we'll send a scroll to.
Gamma.
Lucky you, we get to send a letter to Polyphemus, the Cyclops that you blinded. Here you are. You may write whatever you like.
Okay, it's Odysseus. Remember me?
All right.
Sorry, Athena.
Let's see what it says. Arg, Odysseus, my father will hear about this. Alrighty.
I remember stabbing his eye. Those were the good old days.
Yep. Before we call in your wife, I have one more question. How hard was it to resist the sirens when you heard their luring voices?
Well, I didn't expect it to be terribly hard because Circe gave me the beeswax to block out the sound, but I gave it to the men instead. They tied me to the mast of the ship, and I told them to tie me tighter if I struggled. The sirens had the most beautiful voices, and of course, I struggled. I wanted to be with them more than anything, but the men followed my instructions and bound me tighter when I began to resist the ropes. Thankfully, we all made it through alive and well, and no one was lured into the water.
Thank you for your time, Odysseus. It's been a pleasure having you on our show today. Our next guest today is Odysseus' lovely wife. Please welcome the beautiful and cunning Penelope.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
The pleasure's all mine, Penelope. I have a few questions for you. Do you mind?
No, not at all.
Please tell me, what was it like having so many suitors at your palace and not being able to get rid of them?
It was horrendous. I wasn't even considering marrying any of them. But according to Greek hospitality, they could stay in my house. And of course they did.
Horrible. How did you feel when the suitors found out that you weren't keeping your promise to marry them once the shroud was finished? That you were, in fact, unraveling it every night?
I felt very discouraged because I knew that now I would have to finish the shroud and eventually marry one of them.
But then Odysseus came back. Tell me about that.
Well, when Euryclea told me that Odysseus was back and that he had killed all of the suitors, I didn't believe her. I thought she had gone mad, but she insisted that the strange man was indeed Odysseus. So I decided to move Odysseus' bed outside my room. I told the stranger that he could sleep there. Once he saw that I moved his bed, he snapped, and then I knew he was indeed Odysseus. It was a joyous for you.
I'm sure it was. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Penelope.
The pleasure's all mine.
Please welcome the next guest, the esteemed son of Odysseus, Telemachus. Hello, Telemachus. It's a pleasure to have you on my show.
Thank you, Athena. It's lovely to be here.
How was it having to be the man of the house while your father was away?
It was hard at first having handled everything my father did, but I got used to it, especially with the help of you.
Why, thank you, Telemachus. Tell me about your journey to find out more about your father.
It was very long, but very fulfilling. I went to many different cities to talk to many different kings and queens about my father. I learned so much, and I grew to appreciate my father much more through my journey.
That's very wonderful that you learned so much from your father. That was my plan. Since you were a baby the last time you saw your father, how was it seeing him for the first time when he came back?
It was unbelievable. I had seen him before, just a few hours before, but he had a disguise on. When he finally shed it, I was so surprised. We both began to weep, embracing each other. It was one of the happiest moments of my life.
It's just touching, Telemachus. Such a wonderful story. I just have one more question for you. How did you and Odysseus defeat the suitors?
Well, we decided to disguise my father as a beggar, then bring him into the castle. I pretended that I didn't know him and gave him food. I also told him to ask anyone for food. So he went down the line of suitors asking for food. This told him who was kind and who was not.
But I still ordered you to kill everyone.
Yes you did. Anyways, 2 days later, we had a contest. Whoever could string Odysseus' ball could marry my mother. I tried, but my father told me not to string it. I passed the ball along, and each of the suitors failed to string it. My father decided to give a try, and I told my mother to go up to her room, for this was a man's fair. The suitors began laughing at my father until he shot the arrow through 12 axle head. Then Odysseus and I began to kill off the suitors. They had no weapons, so it was quite easy.
Wow, that's so intense. You and your father are both very cunning. Thank you so much for appearing on my show today, Telemachus.
Of course, Athena, it was a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in on this episode of Live with Athena and the Greeks. Tune in next week